What's up? You're listening to The Long Game. This is David Lee Kim, your host and co-founder of Omniscient Digital. In this episode, we chat with Holly Chen. Holly is a marketing and growth advisor, angel investor, and executive coach. She's the founder of ExponentialX, a marketing and growth collective, and founder of Ceiling Breakers, a leadership program for underrepresented leaders. While doing all of that, she's also a VP of marketing at Mosaic.tech and hosts a podcast called Growing Unicorns. Before that, she has held interim CMO roles or advised companies like Loom, Miro, ServiceNow, Teamflow, and more. She also previously ran global digital marketing at Slack and was head of growth at Google e-commerce. In this conversation, we talk about how Holly manages everything she's doing, everything I just listed, and her mindset in juggling it all. She also shares her decision-making process at each step in her career that led her to where she is today. Then we go into product-led growth, product-led sales, and how to approach marketing and new go-to-market motions during a recession. At the end of our conversation, we learn about something she feels particularly passionate about as a result of her own personal experiences. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. Here's a conversation with Holly Chen. Hey, Holly, it's so great to see you again and have you on a pod. Thanks so much for making the time.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to catch up.
Yeah. So as I was prepping for our conversation, I was trying to remember how we met. And I'm not sure if you remember. I think it was during Growth Marketing Conference in San Francisco. So like 2018, 2019. And I believe back then you were at Slack. And since then, you've done quite a lot. So I'm going to list them out really quickly because you're such a boss. So since Slack, you've advised or are advising companies like Loom, Miro, and ServiceNow on product-led growth. You started a podcast, which folks should listen to, called Growth Unicorns. You became an angel investor. You founded Ceiling Breakers, which is a coaching company for leaders from underrepresented backgrounds. You founded ExponentialX, a growth and marketing advisory collective for growth stage companies. And I just learned you took a new role as VP of marketing at Mosaic. So first off, how are you doing? How are you managing all of that? Like, what's your secret?
David, you also went on doing amazing things. You're like already driving huge impact at HubSpot, and now doing your own agency and growing the agency exponentially. So kudos. How did you do that?
You just flipped that on me. I think very clear prioritization and saying no to things was probably it. I'm sure you had to say no to a lot of things, so I'm curious about that. And probably sacrificing like spending time with friends and family, which is the part no one talks about, I think.
I really relate to it. It's like I see it as a dynamic balance, and people talk about work-life balance. It's and then work-life integration. I think it's a really dynamic, situation where, like, in certain days, you are going to work, like 12, 14-hour days to get something out the door if you're at a deadline. In other days, you're like, well, I need to take a break and make sure my mental health is nurtured and or I have space to think beyond my day to day and to be creative. So I think it's really a dynamic balance, and also intentional choice, right? Like in certain days, you say, "Oh, I intentionally choose to sit in front of my TV and watch trash, reality TV. But that's my intentional choice of relaxing and get my mind off the day to day. That as long as the choice is intentional, that is that's what you need. So
Yeah. I think for me years ago, I remember I would be out with friends, and then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, but I have this thing that I should be working on. And if I was working on a thing, I'd be like, oh, I could be out with friends right now. So it was a lose-lose situation. And now I just explicitly, like you said, I'm intentional. Like I can, after dinner, I have the option to keep working on this thing or watch some trash TV. And I'm like, if I watch this trash TV, I need to not be on my laptop, not on my phone, and just enjoy it and not
Yes.
like worrying about the work. So that I resonate with that a lot.
Absolutely. It's all about present
Yeah.
and being present at watching trash TV.
Yeah. So, okay. So you've had a lot of milestones in career, I think. And since I think it seemed like that was a pivotal moment in your career. So maybe you can work up to that milestone. Like what were the career or professional milestones that led to you leading a growth team at Slack?
That's a really good question. I think for me, two guiding principles is curiosity and follow what's emerging. Curiosity means like if I'm curious just in general about a lot of things, and that led me to learn new areas and new space in new industry, new functional areas, and also the sense of confidence that I can learn anything if I put my mind to it. And two is following what's emerging. So what's emerging in me and in the market. Like when I see a new trend, just be clear, like, is this something that I want to dive into, and follow that intentionality. So I would say the curiosity led me to taking a strategy consulting role at Deloitte as my first job, because I was curious about a lot of things and I didn't know what I like actually want to focus on. So consulting was a really good foundation about learning things really fast. Then what's emerging in me was the desire to make more impact and see how things are executed. And that led me to startup. And then the sort of the pain I felt in scaling the startup led me to Google, where I get more scaling experience. Then sort of what's emerging in me of a desire to not commute led me to Slack. So it's really like like a self-awareness and acceptance of like, okay, like I don't want to commute and that's okay.
Yeah. Were those, maybe going back to what we were talking about earlier, were they intentional moves where you were at the role and you kind of sat down, and I don't know what it looks like for you. Like, did you journal or just like take a walk and just think about this and make this space for that? Or was there some sort of conversation you had that led to that? How, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what's the decision-making process for that? Besides, hey, I don't want to commute. I'm sure there were other things that went into I'm gonna leave Google.
Yeah, it's I would say I became more intentional over the years. So all of the above. I do journal, and then I do I think through. And a few years ago, I adopted a process. It's actually a process from my executive coach, and she has this yearly reflection exercise. It's a list of questions. Typically, I do it at the last week of the year. And the questions, things like, in the past year, what are things that brought you joy? What are the things that you you didn't enjoy doing? The things that are important in your life, have you spent enough time on them, and why not? So that list of inquiry typically led to, of course, like in the process of it, doing a lot of journaling and reflection, and a lot of the decision, and especially bigger decisions, came out of that yearly reflection exercise.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe that transition to this next part, but what sort of reflections did you have that led you to decide after Slack that you were going to work for yourself? I know you just took on a new role at Mosaic now, but what led you to focus on, like, I'm not going to work for someone else for a few years?
Yeah, I used to be having this like ideal career ladder as like, okay, cool, like time to become a manager, or time to get promoted to director, and like that was a very linear view of life, and the reflection really let me take a step back and say, what are really important in my life? What I actually care about? What would make my life meaningful? And those reflections, I realized one, what's really important is my desire for learning and growth. And that should be the guiding principle of any role that I take. And two is I want to be more involved in community, and like that connection is really important to me. So learning and growth. I learned a huge amount at Slack, and grew as a person and also professionally. And my desire at the time was to get even more exposure to the space. So getting pattern matching of different businesses. One question I had was like, okay, I had a lot of success, and Slack grew like super fast. Was it because like everything that I like did, or is it like regardless, Slack is a great product and it's going to grow anyways? So like I want to run more experiments to see what works, what doesn't. And is that something that I can take to other places and really help a wide variety of companies to grow? So that desire for learning and growth took me to to advising and taking interim roles.
Yeah. What were the conclusions of those experiments? It seems like, I mean, Miro's pretty big. ServiceNow seems to be. I met, I believe, the person leading their PLG motion, which is like that separate product, at SaaStr last year. It seems like that's going well. Have you confirmed, yes, Holly Chen does have a huge impact?
I think it's really the product is the number one. Is like by nature, if you have a bad product, it's really hard to do growth. So the product needs to be fantastic, and of course there are tactics and strategies we can employ to accelerate those growth. So that is like there are definitely patterns to apply. At the same time, I realized every company is different. There are many dimensions. So there's, industry, which has its own dynamic. There is target audience. So like, engineering audience versus a marketer audience versus a finance audience, behavior is going to be different. There is ACV. So is like how low the pricing versus a, like 5-figure deal versus 7-figure deal, it's going to be different. And also sort of the team dynamic. What kind of team skill sets do you have? What's the culture? Like there's so many different dimensions. It's hard to say, okay, this is a silver bullet that's going to apply to many different companies. Even on surface, they all look like PLG companies, or even they all look like, future of work, or, like developer tools. It's still going to be very different. So what I really learned is like, okay, like it's really the knowledge and system thinking that we accumulate over the years, and like situational analysis to apply to to different stages and times of the growth. So yes.
Yeah, it sounds like it's at a certain point, it's no longer about like the growth tactics or channels anymore. It's about that, like understanding the whole system that you're working in and all those different variables included. And I know lots of folks I've met, like especially prospects I speak to, or even clients might go straight to the tactics. And it's always an exercise. I'm like, wait, hold on, let's zoom out. What's the goal? Like what's the context of everything? And so I know you've been at Mosaic for 4 months. What's going on there? What are you up to? What's your focus? And why did you decide to take on a new full-time in-house role?
3 months.
3 months.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah, that's it's a great question. I just finished my 90 days, so it's a good time to reflect on it. I took the full-time role mainly, like, again, going back to the follow what's emerging in me. I really enjoyed the interim roles and the advisory roles, but part of me really missed the building something from small to big, and that sort of that grind. I actually missed the grind. I know. I don't know. Like,
I know people leave that and never go back, but you're going back to it.
I know. I was like, oh, I'm going back to the matrix. I miss that building process. I think advising is fantastic for that breadth, but sometimes you don't go too deep. For certain clients, I go into tactics, but you're there for 6 months, 9 months. You don't get to see the entire journey. So I really want to spend some time seeing the entire journey, and the good and bad out of building something. I also miss having a team. So especially learning from the cross-functional teams, like kind of nurturing someone and seeing them come to life and really embracing themselves and coaching them. That gives me a lot of satisfaction. And I get some of that in coaching, but not like in like advising, but not every day to the extent that I do with a full-time role. So
yeah,
that
makes sense. Well, congrats on your 90 days.
I'm excited. It's an interesting time to take a full-time role. Honestly, it's as head of marketing, you always want to show like exponential growth when the economy is fantastic. Great, like if the company is going to grow like 5x in a down economy. As a new head of marketing, it's like, well, how much is what you can do like from a strategy, tactics, and like a process perspective, and how much is the macro environment will impact the willingness to buy from your buyers, especially, for example, at Mosaic, the buyer is VP of Finance, which is like the person who's like telling other departments to cut their cost. So it's definitely an interesting time to take a full-time role. And
it's not just a startup grind. It's you taking on like selling into a department that doesn't want to spend money. So you're playing on hard mode as well. So props to you for that. So maybe for this next part, I want to talk about PLG and PLS, or product-led growth and product-led sales, which product-led sales is a bit newer, but whenever you read about these things or whenever people give talks, they typically refer to the same case studies like Dropbox and Slack. And I honestly kind of get annoyed at those at this point because they're old examples and the market's so different now. And the industry is just so much more evolved. Users are much more evolved. Like B2B companies are more evolved in their buying processes. So as you were advising all these different companies, like what were the frameworks you used when you were helping advise them on how to implement like a product-led motion?
I think a lot of companies want to go to PLG, not necessarily because they're the best fit for PLG, but more like, oh, we heard people talking about it.
It's
VCs
hype.
are all, yeah, it's like VCs are talking about it, or other companies are doing it. So we better get on it. So I think the first question is like, why do we want to do PLG? Is our product a good fit to do PLG? And then it's, the hows, in like organizational and product and go-to-market hows. I think that the first question is, PLG is actually a good motion for products, in my mind, for products that are relatively easy to understand and to learn, so that like individual users can quickly, with help, understand like how to take the best value out of the product. So ideally, the aha moment of, oh, this is what to use this product for, comes naturally, from just products or some educational help. Their products also have the access issue. For example, if the product has to connect with some internal system with PII or with financial information, or like it writes to your code base, and for those products it can be quite hard to do entirely self-serve. So at that time, think through like what are the motions that we need to create from a product perspective to enable that, or ultimately is the question to are we a good fit for a PLG? Yeah. So that, and then once you decide, okay, like our product is relatively easy for people to learn, from an onboarding experience perspective, we can get people to get value from the product, and the users can influence the buyers from a growth perspective. Then how do we think about one from organizational perspective and skill set perspective? Do we have the people have the experience to execute this? And two, do we have the right expectations of PLG in the short-term impact? What I've seen is companies who are traditionally sales-led, that already have like a pretty mature sort of MQL, SQL, like a sales process, trying to do PLG, thinking that PLG is going to be purely incremental. But what they see is there's actually cannibalization of existing sales funnel. And in the short term, there's going to be a reduction of MQLs. And in the short term, there's going to be an explosion to low quality free users. And that's just the fact for a lot of the PLG motions. So are we okay with that? In the short term, what are the things that we can implement to make sure we have the quality users, and what are the data and sort of the system enablement we need to bring on board in order to identify those free users and make the most use of those free users when they are ready. There's also a tendency of milking those free users as soon as possible. Like as the moment they sign up, like a salesperson is like,
salesperson,
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like we have 1,000 new users today.
Print cash.
Right. Yeah, it's just not going to be very effective. So there's the patience that's needed to get to the point of value for the PLG users. So that expectation, and like I think for the sales led going to PLG, it's really important to have top buy-in from the CEO and the board, and say this is an investment we're going to make, and we understand the short-term impact, but we do believe that long-term it will reduce our costs, and here's all the enablement we're gonna make to make that happen.
Yeah. Literally everything you just said, I ran into when I was at my last company, because it was a predominantly sales-led company, the enterprise sales, and we acquired a company and wanted to implement PLG. And let's say there were unrealistic expectations and a desire to start squeezing some revenue out of the motion immediately, which I'd say could have been more successful, but it wasn't a failure either. But I wish I was talking to you back then, because that would have helped navigate some of those conversations. It was tough. And so I have also noticed that more B2B companies that are already established, have established go-to-markets, are trying to implement this in parallel PLG motion. So it sounds like you've spoken to a couple of those companies. How do you typically advise they do it? Like, is there a framework for that? Or is it just, hey, be patient, like commit to the investment, and like don't try to monetize too early? Is it as simple as that? It's simple but not easy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all of the above, and plus there needs to be like I would say system and data readiness to do this. And that's why there's a lot of PL PLS systems that's trying to do this. And like when identifying the users, first of all, like identify the users with data enrichment, and two is when like gather the signals that when they are ready, and define your like PQL, like a product qualified leads, and or PQA, product qualified accounts, in a data-driven way, so that like we're ready to approach them, and have ideally a personalized approach based on their user behaviors and the people and the information we know about the users. I think that piece is critical to make it successful, and the type of talent and type of systems is not necessarily always there in these companies. How do we like run these two processes in parallel? So a lot of companies is like, okay, we have a self-serve funnel and they're just like doing their thing, and then we have a sales funnel and they're doing their thing, and they don't touch with each other. Even like, for example, from like super simple example of sending emails, right? Like sending emails to millions of users versus sending emails very personalized to tens of thousands of users, from a cost perspective is different. From a sophistication and feature perspective is different. Should we use the same? Like, should we all use HubSpot, or like should we use a different like a type of tools? And how do we connect the users with the buyers? And even from that is not easy problem to solve.
Yeah. And then what's interesting too is on the other side of things is you see these companies that started off product-led growth now realizing that they need to move up market in order to grow revenue more quickly, because maybe there's a ceiling, or the ACV is not big enough in the SMB or like the smaller companies. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of companies trying to make that transition too, especially with, I'm going to call it a recession. Like folks are trying to be more profitable sooner rather than later. So what sort of challenges do you typically see companies running into when they're trying to transition from, like maybe not transition from, but add on that more like enterprise sales motion to a purely PLG product before?
I think one thing is be really clear what is the incremental added value to the enterprise plan. Why would people upgrade? I see companies just slap on a SSO or like some privacy controls, and that's it. Like, and then all of a sudden it's like 50x overpricing, and that's not a strong enough of a justification. So like, what are the incremental value companies are getting in having a team plan or a enterprise plan? So that could be more visibility on team performance or judging across departments, or it could be one place to store all of your company's information for easy access, or it could be ability to search for things when you need them from a company level, or it could be like generating news insights from the usage of our users. So like there needs to be added value, so like a 10x value to justify the 10x increase in pricing. So that's one. And then second one is like for this motion, there are certain team members, like really about the team, like the skill sets that we need to hire for. Sometimes existing team, if they are like very used to PLG, it's all about was not all about, is like it's a lot about driving volume, and we know that we can scale, let's say, our performance marketing spend relatively similar curve to the user growth. So like spend and user growth pretty similar, versus in a sales driven a market motion, a lot of it is actually takes a long time to build relationships, to actually have like multiple touch points in converting into a 6-7 figure deal. And that is a mindset shift to the team. And sometimes your existing team can change that mindset and adding on that. And sometimes you do need to hire people who've done the 6-7 figure deal experience to run that process. And then it becomes like, how do these two teams are structured and working together, and handoff, and also giving credit or like attribution to each of these teams. I think that is like a pretty critical to figure out. And if you add on other dimensions like geo, right? Like, do you have a centralized team to run PLG motion? Do you have a regional team to run sales-led motion? Or like, how do you think about like structuring your team, like and all that? The complexity can add up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting because whether you're an established B2B sales-led company trying to implement PLG, or a PLG first company moving to enterprise motion, it's going to be a change in DNA, and it's less of a transition of go-to-market and more of a transition of DNA, like company culture and DNA that needs to be navigated. Like enterprise sales rep, amazing at getting to 6 and 7 figure deals, but get them on a call with someone who's already used the product and is asking how to use it, and they probably aren't as familiar with that sort of conversation, and vice versa. Someone who can pick up an inbound call and close out like a couple $1,000 deal doesn't have the muscle built to go chase 7 executives at a company and multi-thread that conversation into a conversation. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And also from a budget allocation perspective, right? Like you now have a choice of, well, like I have, I don't know, like $10 million, and how much do I put in the self-serve funnel and continue to drive the user growth and waiting for these users to become, like sales ready. And there's also a choice now, since you have a sales team, to go directly to the decision makers and do the traditional B2B sales. And how do we allocate this budget, considering the time to convert and the success of conversion rates and the retention rates of the different audiences? And if you add these factors up and like allocating budget in a way that's like optimized for the eventual like ARR growth, and sometimes it is a choice of like shorter term, a longer term, and like sustainable growth.
So that leads me to maybe the question that's been on my mind a lot because of all this conversation about recession and marketing budgets being cut. When a company is trying to figure out, like, where do I allocate my dollars? Is it to the sales-led program? Is it to this PLG program that might take longer to pan out? In my mind, the thinking is, if the sales program is already working, like, we know how much $1, like put $1 in, get $10 out. we know that works already. Would it make sense to like, hey, let's not do the PLG thing and focus on that? Or like, how would you advise companies in this current market condition on like placing those bets?
Yeah, it's really in this one is really situational, and the initial fit to a POG versus sales led is the critical deciding factor. So the answer to different businesses will be different. I do think in the short term there is a desire to make sure we manage the burn. And for PLG companies, the R&D like increase. I think it's Thomas like wrote a blog about like R&D increase is more than like sales and marketing increase in the past few years, and probably because of the PLG motion. So like for PLG, yes, you're gonna like spend less in your sales and marketing, but the R&D cost is gonna be bigger and increase. So like sometimes it is like just balances out. In order to have a PLG, you do have to have like engineers doing the product features. In a down market, I think there's going to be a lot more pressure on the marketing team or growth team to do more with less. Sometimes and to deliver more of a shorter term impact than a longer term impact. So there's going to be a conversation around expectations on return on investment. So the performance marketing and SEO like or organic channels and the time frame of the impact could be like 2 to 3 months down the road. And then there's other programs like community or like brand building efforts. So the turnaround is probably like 9 months to a year. Like, are we ready to do those investments knowing in the short term, we're not going to see a direct return on investment. So every company needs to make that decision intentionally. Added the complexity of now, cookies are going away and performance marketing is becoming more and more expensive. And so marketer's job is going to be very hard, in a down market like this.
Yeah, I've noticed this trend, and I'm curious what you're seeing as like, it felt like our industry went from this very brand and creative marketer type, like Don Draper, to more of this like performance direct response attribution, like running ads and being able to communicate like how much revenue you've gotten. And now it's sort of swinging the other direction where maybe it's because of all these things with cookies or people just being more aware, like, oh, actually attribution's all an illusion. And like, we're shifting more to the foundations of marketing of like, what's our positioning, what's our messaging and all of that. Are you seeing anything like that? Or am I just selectively choosing to see these things?
I think is absolutely right. You do see like that. That's exactly the trend I also see. I think one very tempting thing to do is to expect 100% accuracy in attribution model. I still believe in a multi-touch world because, especially for B2B and for a conversion window over, 3 months or 6 months or even longer, you do have to take into account of like the various different things you do. But the effort of it is not only looking at first touch or last touch. The effort is understanding here all these touch points and make an effort in understanding the incremental value and measuring things not from a individual vendor level or channel level, measuring things from overall marketing effectiveness level. So, like your paid efforts, probably I can figure out, 50% of the people that we can cookie. But the rest of the 50% is probably going to come through like the direct channels that I cannot track. But my overall marketing ROI is X. And added to it is also like my overall sales and marketing effectiveness is something. So like a lot of times the marketing leaders only looking at like marketing effectiveness. But for if you're working very closely with sales team and actually driving leads for the sales team, then like, do we only care about inbound pipeline, like the marketing
Mm-hmm.
directly drive, or do we also care about enabling outbound and driving like outbound pipeline? And how much do you want your outbound team to tap into your marketing driven like inbound pool to prospects? In a down market, maybe your outbound team want to get more aggressive in just going after your content download leads that are not necessarily ready, but like we really want we really want people. Like that's a conversation. It's like, okay, like marketing impact is not only like care about inbound, but also like the overall sales and marketing effectiveness. Ultimately, sales and marketing needs to align on one North Star metric, which is the pipelines, the ARR.
Mm-hmm.
And as a marketing leader, you have to go beyond just thinking about marketing, but thinking about the company perspective.
Yeah. Maybe less about attribution, but still talking about tooling. I've spoken to these companies like Pocus and Calixa that are building out these PLS platforms. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, but what's your take on all these tools that are popping up in our space?
Yeah, I think those can be very helpful. Personal opinion. I think we still need to solve how like the system of record, the source of truth question. So a lot of these tools are like gather data and then do some, scoring and signals and say, here's like the sales ready leads. And that's great if a company already have a, like a Snowflake or a data warehouse, and there's also those like data and what those data say. So should I be looking at a Focus every day to understand it, or should I like put a model together from Snowflake and looking at that? So I think that's a decision that every company needs to make. So these kind of PLS tools will run into that a little bit.
It's like, you mean like, do we just build something internally, or should we trust this other third-party platform that's kind of a black box and we wouldn't know how it works? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And what if, what are like internal, like sometimes it's pretty subjective. It's like, who says, and this is ready, like, even for like scoring, like, oh, engagement score, like 35 is like, how subjective is that? Or is it actually based on incrementality study or something that's more data driven? So I think that's the jury is still out and how different companies want to use these tools. Yeah. But I'm actually like excited, like at least there's an effort in trying this, and with the AI, there's like more data going into these companies, and hopefully they can say, okay, across this type of customers, and here's what we see, and here's some insights we can offer. So I'm hopeful that like with the product development and with more insights, there's going to be more mature products and developments on the road.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the more mature companies, instead of using another product like that, they would, like the way I'm sort of seeing marketing teams is they're going to have data scientists on the marketing team. Like data is not a separate team that marketing asks for resources. It's on the team. They have someone like writing SQL and like building out these models to understand like how to qualify leads on their own instead of using these other products. And it seems like more companies are moving on to a data warehouse and using that as a source of truth, but maybe I'm being too hopeful there.
No, absolutely. You have to. They're like data sitting in all kinds of systems. And marketing is like, so obvious is that, like, we're always looking for new systems and new channels, and there's always new data coming in, and instead of going to like a 20 different systems. And sometimes like these marketing automation tools can integrate with certain channels, but manual in other channels. So if we get everything into a data warehouse, we can start taking some steps in matching folks. And sometimes it is just like really hard for like ubiquitous systems to do that work. You do need a data scientist to say, okay, here's the different signals, so we can do some ID matching, some personal email with like business email matching, with some cookie in there and some enrichment in there. Okay, like now we have like a better view of our customers, and that is actually a data science work versus I think some of the tools are starting to do that too. Yeah. So it's, I'm hopeful in general.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. I loved geeking out about PLG and tooling with you, but I want to get a little more personal. So when I was doing my research, I saw you studied Italian, Eurasian Studies, International Business and Finance, which that last one makes sense. You worked for United Nations and Chamber of Commerce for a little bit. So how did you end up in tech?
No, yeah, it's I think going back to not knowing what I want to do. I was like, oh, cool! Like, I want to see the world. So I grew up in China, and like studying a foreign language is your path to know about the world. And I was trained to be a diplomat, and then decided working for the government is probably not my best career path.
Oh, were you planning on working for the Chinese government?
Yeah. Like,
okay.
Yeah, the university I went to
Very
is
different.
like basically the prep school for Chinese foreign ministry. So like a lot of my classmates were like a diplomats today. So that was what I thought I would want to do, but I pretty quickly it's like, not my path. And then I was interested in just like I learned Italian, which is like my curiosity about culture, like in Europe, that led me to like doing the master's in European studies. And during the studies, I took some internship at AT Kearney and all these like more like private sectors. And then I was like, oh, cool, that's cool. I can see on project basis my impact. And what I learned about myself is I want to see the impact. I want to have my hands into like the nitty gritty. Like I want the grind. So that's like what took me to like the private sector and went into tech.
So was it those internships that kind of took you off that more straight cookie cutter path? Because it sounds like a lot of your friends decided, nope, I'm going to go down this path. It's laid out for me. What made you different? Or what experience did you have that led you to make a different decision from them?
That's a good question. Well, like the honest answer is there is a gender like discrimination in like going into some of these roles at the government. So that's just I can say a lot about it, and that's why I'm like so passionate about like getting DEI and underrepresented leaders and the equal opportunity, because like that is a factor. I think for me is it ultimately comes down to self-acceptance. It's like, here's what I care about, here's what I'm interested in, and I live a unique life that may be different from what's accepted or what's considered like societal success. And am I okay with that? And it wasn't okay with that for a while, but then I got more okay with that as I grew older. So, yeah.
Got it. And so you just mentioned a lot about like diversity and equity and inclusion and feeling very passionate about that. So tell us about Ceiling Breakers. Like, what's the story behind that, and what are you doing with Ceiling Breakers?
Yeah, Ceiling Breakers really grew out of just the realization that the system is not set up, like purely sort of like a fair way for everyone. Even when we talk about equality and freedom in this country, but for people coming from like diverse backgrounds, it is actually not. And I wasn't really like feeling strongly about it. I was like, cool, like I'll just work hard and like I'm gonna get promoted and that's all I care about. But Black Lives Matter movement made me like just feeling like finally got in touch with the anger that I had about like why we like you probably also see that, right? Like a lot of Asian employees, like we work so hard and somehow there is this perception that Asians are not leaders and or like they just do hard work, but they're not like executive material. Is it actually true or is it like a perception? So that's that. And then at the same time, I also know some of the limitations in my own mindset that perpetuates that like external perception. And I know there's a lot of work that I need to do and we like need to do as the underrepresented people to say, here's how do we free ourselves and change our mindset and actually, be ready for that bigger role. So Ceiling Breakers was created to help people who are underrepresented. We're talking about like people of color, immigrants, women, and LGBTQ community who traditionally may not have access to like things like executive coaching that I benefit so much and unleash so much potential and power in me. And I wish more people would have access to it. But these kind of things, it costs like, $20K every 6 months. It is not easy to have access to until you get to that director level or VP level. And how do we democratize that? So that's why I created Ceiling Breakers and to give access of executive coaching to underrepresented leaders.
I love it. And just to dig into that a little more, is it executive coaching like one-on-one or is it like groups? Tell us more about that because I'm sure folks listening may be interested.
Yeah, it's a group. And one-on-one is still going to be super expensive. The executive coaches I work with in other places, they charge like thousands of dollars per hour to do those. But like a group level, you can like reduce that cost down. And also the impact I observed after running this for 2.5 years is people really appreciate the community element to it. Like actually knowing that we're not alone in our struggles has huge unlock for a lot of us, and that have been feeling I'm the only one that's feeling this, and I'm alone in this, versus, oh, actually other people also felt it, and that person may not look like me at the same time. So like, an African-American woman may feel exactly the same as an Asian male who's, like gay. Like that feeling of otherness is common. So that community of, oh, actually, like we have people we trust and can go back to, and that's in our corner and understand our pain is very powerful.
Yeah, and I'll just plus one to the value of having coaches. I've been lucky to have a couple myself, and I'm Cambodian American, which if you disaggregate Asian into like Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai, Cambodian, all that, like we're kind of at the bottom, like close to the bottom of like representation. And so I've been lucky to have coaches where they're like, you're fortunate that HubSpot's paying for this because otherwise this is like $3,000 an hour. I'm like, oh my goodness, like how would we get access to you without like companies providing that access? And so very happy that you're providing that sort of coaching for folks like us. Cool.
Yes, it's a journey.
Yeah, I know we're coming up on time. So how about we wrap up with a couple closing questions and we'll end it there. So first question here, what opinion do you have about business that you think people would disagree with?
That's a hard question. I think ultimately I think a lot of people will agree, but not necessarily top of mind. Is the mission and the motivation part of the business, and thinking like there's actually different motivations beyond financial motivations and why someone would want to work at a certain company. Things like learning, growth, things like feeling belonging, things like working with people I like. Sometimes sometimes it's not super obvious, but those are the fundamental motivations beyond financial that we don't always remember, and as managers to really understand the different motivations of people and motivate them differently to have impact.
I love it. Yeah, that's something that's been at least top of mind for me recently as we think about hiring a ton of people next year. What's one impactful piece of advice you've been given?
What I really enjoy this is actually like different people gave me like different versions of this, and what I summarize it is consistent with belief and situational with delivery. What I mean by that is what we believe in and my principles don't change, and I need to let these principles known to other people, and so like I'm consistent in like in the principles that drives my actions, and people hear it and remember it, and it's like, oh cool, like Holly is all about this, but it needs to be situational with delivery at different with different people, and they receive things differently. So when deliver, it is important to deliver in a way that they can accept and can actually hear it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You put it in a very clear, succinct way. Like something so complex, but you simplified it. Thank you for that. And then what's one book you'd recommend more people read?
I'm a huge fan of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. There's so much, and I almost want to do a book club, like every month, every week, we discuss one commitment out of the 15 commitments, and every single one is so deep and so applicable. I highly recommend.
I've heard that book a couple times, and now that I've heard it from you, I'm going to move it up my queue. So
Nice.
Thank you for that. And if you do a book club, I would love to be a part of that. If I'm allowed to.
You're top of the list.
Thank you. All right, last question. Where can people find you on the internet?
I think LinkedIn is a good way, and I also run just ceilingbreakers.us is if they want to know more about the program.
Awesome. Holly, this was a great conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks so much for having me.